even U.S. citizens can now be dragged away without a trial. This is absolutely wild. And a lot of this, I believe, tracks back to the Laken-Riley Act. The Laken-Riley Act, you will recall, was passed with the help of 42 members of the House of Representatives, Democrats, and 12, as I recall, Democratic, maybe 14 Democratic members of the United States Senate. And what it says is that ICE, it empowers, the Immigration Customs Enforcement, it empowers ICE to arrest people on U.S. soil if they suspect that that person may be here illegally. Now, they don't need any proof. And according to ICE, they can deport people without any proof, which is exactly what happened last week to roughly 250 Venezuelan nationals, or alleged Venezuelan. We don't even know. We have no idea how many of these people might be U.S. citizens, how many of them might be Mexicans, how many of them might be Venezuelans. It appears that so far, none of them have been convicted of any crimes. In fact, the White House came out and said, well, they've been in the country a short time. See, these are, and therefore they haven't had time to commit crimes. This is like Minority Report, right? The old Tom Cruise movie where we're gonna arrest people before they commit a crime to prevent them from committing the crime. I mean, this is just nuts. And I mean, it's wrong. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. It's a violation of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or at least those parts of the Bill of Rights. And, Thom Hartmann says, I don't care what judges say. The judges are pushing back, but no judge yet so far has had the courage to hold a Trump lawyer, an administration lawyer, in contempt. And, they have the power to do that. We'll get into that a little later, and as I mentioned a couple of days ago, but this is crazy what's going on. A U.S. citizen from Chicago was among 22 people who were arrested and detained by ICE last week. The U.S. Government Accountability Office found that during Trump's first term, an estimated 600 U.S. citizens were arrested and an estimated 70 U.S. citizens were deported. But this Laken-Riley Act has put this on steroids. Here's a couple of stories. Fabian Schmidt, a German-born engineer, has lived in the United States for nearly 2 decades, legally working, paying taxes, and contributing to his community. The guy's got a green card, right? None of that mattered when he returned home from a trip abroad. As soon as he landed at Logan Airport in Boston, ICE agents pulled him aside. His green card renewal was flagged for some unknown reason. No explanation, no opportunity to clarify, just a red mark in a government system. That was all it took. ICE stripped him of his clothes, subjected him to hours of aggressive questioning, locked him in a detention center, threw him into an ice-cold shower, left him shivering on the concrete floor, naked, humiliated, and terrified. For days, his mother, Astrid, desperately tried to find him. Keep in mind, this is a guy who's lived in the country for 20 years, legally, is still living here legally. She called ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and any agency that might give her an answer. They all ignored her or outright lied to her, claiming they had no record of her son. When she finally learned where he was, he said, they treat us like animals. He was barely holding it together. And why? Well, they later said, oh, it was a bureaucratic error. Yeah, right. Jessica Brosche, a German tattoo artist visiting the United States. She had a return ticket. She had a legal permission. She had the visa under the visa waiver program. She had a valid German passport. But ICE decided that she just might try to work while visiting under the Laken-Riley Act. Suspicion is enough. Once inside, the nightmare deepened. They threw her into a cell with no bed and no access to legal assistance. For 8 straight days, they kept her in solitary confinement. The lights never dimmed, and the sounds of other detainees screaming in despair echoed through the walls. This is one of these for-profit prisons that Trump loves, that Republicans love, because they kick back, massive campaign contributions to Republicans. She started hallucinating, her grip on reality slipping. Desperate to feel something, anything real, she punched the walls until her knuckles bled. Meanwhile, her best friend Amelia was frantically searching for her. ICE refused to confirm her location or even acknowledge that she existed. No charges, no trial, no legal recourse, just silence. Consider Jasmine Mooney. She's a Canadian actor who starred in the American Pie series. She's a Canadian businesswoman who always played by the rules. She secured a job offer in California, completed all of visa paperwork, followed every U.S. immigration law to the letter. But that didn't stop ICE from shackling her, chaining her wrists, ankles, and waist as if she was a violent offender. For days, she was trapped in a brutal private for-profit detention facility, laying on the bare floor with nothing but a crinkled foil sheet for warmth. Then in the dead of night, ICE dragged her from her cell, bound her in chains again, and forced her onto a bus with dozens of other women. They drove for hours, denying them food, water, or bathroom breaks. By the time she arrived at another private for-profit facility, she'd been awake for 24 hours, was too weak to stand. To this day, ICE won't explain why she was detained. She tells her horrifying story to The Guardian today. You can read it at theguardian.com. She said, I was placed in a real jail unit, 2 levels of cells surrounding a common area, just like in the movies. I was put in a tiny cell alone with a bunk and a toilet. There were around 140 of us in our unit. Many women had lived and worked in the U.S. legally for years, but had overstayed their visas, often after reapplying and then being denied. They had all been detained without warning. This is the bottom line. ICE agents don't need proof. They only need the power to act, and Trump has given it to them. I mean, Canadians, Germans, we've done this now to Canadian citizens, to Germans. They're starting to freak out. The tourism business in this country is collapsing. ProPublica documented yesterday how a 21-year-old U.S. citizen born in Philadelphia was dragged off to detention, how a 10-year-old American citizen girl was deported, interrupting her chemo for brain cancer. An estimated 600 U.S. citizens detained during Trump's first term. Mistaken? No. ICE has become the protection squad. The German word for protection squad is Schutzstaffel. If that's familiar to you, it's typically abbreviated by by 2 letters SS. The protection squad. And they've been given this just basically unlimited power. And now, they've sent these people down to El Salvador in defiance of a federal judge. Marco Rubio retweets, a tweet that says, oopsie, too late. I mean, a president who can deport anyone, even in violation of a judge's order, can also arrest anyone. ISIS, they did this here in Portland back, 5 years ago. They were driving around in vans with no markings on them, out of uniform, no markings on them as individuals, literally kidnapping people off the streets of Portland, beating them up or terrorizing them and then just dumping them in other places as ways to disrupt protesters. Are they going to start doing this again? I think if protests really get to be a big thing, they will. A judge stopped Trump from doing that back in 2005. If he does it today, the question isn't who the ICE protection squads and other federal police agencies will target next. It's who will be left to stop them. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around, and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Thursday. A lot going on. The Dow is down 1,300, 1,400 points, depending on, which minute you're looking at it. Donald Trump is throwing his tantrum, his tariff tantrum. We'll get to that in just a moment as the stock market crashes. Also, Elon Musk yesterday said that there's going to be arrests of people who are defrauding Social Security. Could retirees be the next ones sent to deadly Salvadoran prison? Oh, and when is Musk going to be arrested for the fraud he committed in Wisconsin? Also, what we need to know about Saturday's protest, the hands-off protest. We'll get into that. And the Trump administration doesn't care if a wrongly deported man is sitting in a Salvadoran prison. J.D. Vance says, well, he was no father of the year. He had traffic tickets. Yeah, traffic tickets. And you get deported to El Salvador. Yeah. In the second hour of our program, Phil Ittner is going to drop by live from Kyiv, Ukraine. We'll find out what's going on there. By the way, the only country, three countries were not hit with tariffs yesterday. 3 countries. North Korea, Russia, and Belarus. Trump's allies. Right, the country's run by Belarus, of course, Lukashenko is, cracking down with an iron fist against people who are protesting his and Putin's policies. The 3 countries that are friendly with Trump. Amazing. Also, Trump knows the old saw that we've recently seen acted out by Putin and Netanyahu. When you're in political trouble, just start a war. Is Trump getting ready to bomb Iran or maybe Greenland? I'll tell you about that in the second hour of the program. Some very alarming news about Trump moving B-2 bombers all around the world, but mostly to Diego Garcia, where they could attack Iran. Also, say what? A Nobel Peace Prize winner just got his U.S. visa revoked because he criticized Donald Trump. In the third hour of our program, Alex Lawson of Social Security Works is going to drop by. Every Republican on the Senate Finance Committee just voted to continue Elon Musk's destruction of the Social Security Administration. I'm telling you, it's not just crazy Trump. It's the entire GOP. They're all nuts. They're all in this thing together. They all want to destroy the New Deal, the American dream, the American middle class, and take us back to where we were in 1910 when the American middle class was about 8% of us. And also 10 rules for dealing with Trump's demands for capitulation. This is Robert Reich's post today, and it's a fascinating one. But my op-ed at HartmannReport.com is titled Tariff Tantrum, Trump Plays Yosemite Sam with the Global Economy. And, I say Yosemite Sam. Remember, I mentioned this yesterday. Remember Yosemite Sam from the old Warner Brothers cartoons? He would chase Bugs Bunny around with a shotgun, blam, 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 blowing holes in the walls and the windows and the ceiling. Never managed to hit the rabbit. That's what Trump is doing. He's just blowing holes everywhere. He's blowing things up, and it's not going to work. I mean, it's just because he's doing it the wrong way. Now, yes, tariffs are an important part of economic policy for any country. There's virtually not a country in the world that doesn't have some tariffs on some things. You do that to protect domestic industries. But you do it to protect specific domestic industries. And that's why there's basically 2 ways to do tariffs. The first way is what you do when you're in a war. When Putin invaded Ukraine, we entered essentially a Cold War with Russia. And so what did we do? We used tariffs to punish Russia. We said, we're going to put, there were sanctions as well as tariffs. So when you put tariffs on a country, that's typically considered an act of economic warfare. And you don't want to do that anyway. Like, for example, putting a tariff on Mexico. Well, maybe we would love to get our car manufacturing back from Mexico. Maybe we'd like to get our electronics assembly back from Mexico. But do we really want to put a tax on Mexican coffee? We buy 60 million kilos of Mexican coffee every year. We don't grow coffee in the United States. So no, we don't want to tax Mexican coffee. But if you put a tax on everything coming out of Mexico, you just raise the cost of a cup of coffee in every restaurant and every, living room and kitchen in America. How is that smart? What Trump is doing is putting tariffs on countries instead of products. There are 17,000 categories of tariffs over on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, or not Chamber of Commerce, Department of Commerce's website, the Commerce Department's website. And they're very granular. There's like 740 different categories just of steel. Rolled steel, flat steel, bar steel, round steel, steel ingots, steel this, carbon steel. Every single one of them has a different tariff. But that's not how Trump is doing. I mean, that's how you appropriately do tariffs. You say, okay, which industries in the United States are really industries that we want to keep here or bring back here? Then let's put tariffs on those products, not on countries, but on the products. But what Trump did and what his advisors did, and this is particularly insane. Like, for example, the average tariff on U.S. goods from the European Union is around 3%. Depending on, whether or not you're including cars, it could arguably be as high as 5.6%. But we're putting a much, much larger tariff than that on the European Union. Why? Because Trump didn't actually look at tariffs, or for that matter, non-tariff barriers to trade, like he said he did, like he claimed he did. Instead, what they did was they took the trade deficit that we have with a country, or in this case, the European Union, the trade deficit we have, and divided that by the, here, let me get this. They took the trade deficit, so for example, and divided it by that country's exports to the U.S. So for example, we have a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. This is from James Serwecki. We have a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. Its exports to us are $28 billion. 17.9 divided by 28 is 64%, which Trump claims is the tariff that Indonesia charges us. When in fact, the tariff that Indonesia is actually charging us is, radically lower than that. It's in single digits. So he's not even doing it right? He's doing it stupidly. And this is why Democrats need to boil this message down to something very, very simple. Oh, there's one other piece to this before I get to the Democratic message. And that is that the law says that only Congress can pass tariffs. And you have Maria Cantwell and Chuck Grassley, the Republican from Iowa, proposing legislation this morning to take away from Trump his tariff-setting abilities. Last night, you had the Senate vote 52-48 with Rand Paul, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Mitch McConnell joining the Democrats to declare that the emergency that Trump declared at the beginning of his term in office, which gives him the power to impose these tariffs, is over. Never should have been, because there was no economic emergency before Trump came into office. We had the best economy in the world, literally, according to Economist magazine, and the lowest inflation rate and the lowest jobless numbers in half a century. But here we are. So the Democratic message needs to be, number one, Congress should be imposing tariffs, not Trump, so that they can do it thoughtfully. And number two, tariffs should be on products, not on countries. Imposing tariffs on entire countries is an act of war. Imposing tariffs on products is an act of economic self-preservation. And Trump obviously doesn't know the difference, and his advisors don't know the difference. And Democrats need to educate people about this. I realize that, typically when you make a political argument that includes nuance, it's a losing argument. But I don't think this is. I think people understand this. I'm telling you, having grown up in the Midwest, I grew up in Michigan. We learned about tariffs literally in elementary school, like 4th and 5th grade civics. Anybody from any manufacturing part of the country knows what is going on. Democrats need to take this opportunity.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And now Musk says Social Security arrests coming. I'm guessing the Department of Justice is not real happy with him. We'll talk about that right after the break. Stick around. And welcome back. And let's see here, Rick in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Rick, thanks for watching us or listening to us on the Thom Hartmann app.
Yeah.
What's up?
Unfortunately, it's not that good news, but CNN has been reporting that a lot of world leaders are concerned about if the present program that Trump is doing, there could be a world recession.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily believe it right away, but then I heard Richard Wolff say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, if this continues.
I agree. I completely agree. If he holds to these tariffs for more than a couple of weeks, you are going to see some major realignments, business-wise around the world. And, over the short term, and the short term could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe a decade, you're going to see a serious recession here in the United States. And the old Japanese saying, when the U.S., sneezes, Japan catches a cold. It will go worldwide. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, Richard Wolff is no dummy. He's right.
Yeah, right. So, I wish it was great news, but it's not.
No, I get it. Okay, Rick, thanks for the heads up. Darren in Palmetto, Florida. Hey, Darren, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm fine.
I just want to talk about, and I'm glad you brought it up just a little bit ago, about the resolution that the Senate just passed, 51-48, to stop the tariffs with Canada, but our Speaker of the House is going to stop it.
Yep.
It's like, I thought, it's like, you think Trump's the king, but now the Speaker of the House is the king because he can just stop this thing. And I heard something absurd, I may be wrong on this, that he put some resolution on the floor that yesterday when this came to pass that it's going to extend for the whole year, and that's not why he's going to bring it to the floor. Some absurd thing like that.
Yeah, he's what Mike Johnson did is he. I don't know how he did this. I don't know if it was by proclamation or by altering the rules or whatever. He used some strategy that he understands and I don't, and basically said that the time period from now until the end of the year, or the end of the congressional session, which would be January 3rd, I believe, of next year, that is 1 day. And therefore, the things that require more than 1 day to do can't be done. And I mean, it's just it's weird. And the next time I have a member of Congress on, I'm going to ask them to explain it to me because I don't get it.
I mean, because he is now the king.
Well, in the House of Representatives,
yeah,
he's playing autocrat there. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a reason why they call him MAGA Mike. I mean, he's every bit as much a lover of strongman and authoritarian politics as Trump.
Well, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, this is Darren. Thank you very much for the call. This is just an absolutely wild time to be alive in America. And I would hate to be somebody about to retire with all their money in their 401k right now in the stock market. I mean, this is, I told you a couple of weeks ago, I asked ChatGPT, if I put all my money in gold at the beginning of every Republican administration and then put it all in the stock market at the beginning of every Democratic administration since 1980, what would be the result? If you put it in the stock market, $1 million would end up as, or $100,000 would end up as over $1 million. I'll tell you after the break. Stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So Richard Nixon was a crook, but not a lot of Americans knew that in 1960. But he lost to John Kennedy, not because he was a crook, but because he didn't know how to use television. He refused to wear makeup during the debates. Jack Kennedy understood television, and it was why he was so, widely popular. Calvin Coolidge was the first president to use radio in 1923, but Franklin Roosevelt did his fireside chats starting in 1933, just after he was inaugurated, and they were often listened to by a third of Americans. That's why he got reelected 3 times. He was elected 4 times to president. If Joe Biden had done the same thing during his 4 years, reaching all the American people every week, using social media, the new media, because that was radio and television back in the day, he would be in the White House right now, or Kamala Harris. There's a whole article about this, how Democrats need to get with the plan. They need to figure out how to use social media and get some charismatic candidates out there. Over at HartmannReport.com is titled Democrats' Fatal Flaw. Check it out.
You say you're bringing factories back with a big old stick and a shotgun track. But you're shooting wild, you're missing the wall, hitting your friends and watching them fall. Hey Trump, don't be done with tariffs, pointing fingers, blowing smoke, don't fix it. Tariffs ain't a toy, it's a tool you use smart, not a punchline shout from a Twitter heart.
Welcome back, 22 minutes past the hour. Yep. So, by the way, I asked ChatGPT the following question. This was, a week or so ago that I asked it. But basically I said, I'm finding it. If, since 1960, I had purchased the Dow Jones Industrials every time a Democrat was elected and sold those stocks and purchased gold every time a Republican was elected, how far ahead would I be right now compared to having simply held the Dow all that time or gold all that time? And it points out, in 1960, the Dow was at 619. Gold was $35 an ounce. And then it goes through the presidencies of Kennedy, Johnson, Carter, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, and then Nixon, Ford, Reagan, Bush, and Trump. And, notes the change for every single one of them. And here's what it came up with. And this just blew my mind. If you just, since 1960 to today, which is, 65 years. If you had just bought the Dow Jones Industrials in 1960, $1,000 worth, it would be worth $73,000 now. This is before the crash here in the last couple of days. If you had bought gold, $1,000 worth of gold in 1960, it would be worth $82,000 right now. So, about the same, 73, 82. But if every time a Republican became president, you had sold your stock and bought gold, and every time a Democrat became president, you had sold your gold and bought stock. You following me? Just, betting that Democrats are going to help the stock market and Republicans are going to hurt the stock market. If you had done that, your $1,000 invested in 1960 today would be $1.5 million. Twice as much as either just holding the Dow or just holding gold. It's amazing. Trump's tariff list, by the way, is missing one big country, Russia. Well, I did mention that, and Belarus and North Korea. It's just nuts. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's PAC, the America PAC, has quietly altered a video that they had on their website where this woman who got $1 million check, she says, I did exactly what Elon Musk told everyone to do, sign the petition, refer friends and family, vote, and now I have $1 million. Well, giving somebody money to vote is a felony in Wisconsin. So they've excised the word vote from that clip. So now they've got an edited clip up there because I guess they don't want to admit that Elon Musk committed a felony or started out to commit a felony and then kind of changed in mid-course. Meanwhile, we have nationwide protest. Oh, and also Elon Musk and this has got the Social Security Administration, this got the Justice Department just freaked out. Elon Musk just came out and said that they're going to be arresting people for defrauding Social Security. And the Justice Department is absolutely not happy about this because you're not supposed. Musk gave the details. He says there's this guy who's got 400,000 Social Security numbers and he's selling them. Well, somewhere out there, there's a guy with 400,000 Social Security numbers, and I'm guessing he just hopped on a plane to Canada or Belarus or whatever. So, not so happy. Meanwhile, on Saturday, April 5th, the nationwide hands-off protests are going to happen. It may well be the largest protest in American history. We'll see. Organizers said they have so far 250,000 RSVPs. They note this is not just corruption, this is not just mismanagement, this is a hostile takeover of our country. More than 1,100 rallies in all 50 states. People are protesting attacks on Social Security. The Social Security Administration has been gutted. They're closing Social Security field offices. They've laid off 7,000 employees. People can't call Social Security. People are just, people have called into this program saying, I can't get through. Layoffs across the federal workforce, people are protesting. People are protesting attacks on consumer protections. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, for example, that Musk wants to shut down, has reclaimed tens of billions of dollars that has been stolen from us by big banks and given it back to us. They're protesting anti-immigrant policies, and they're protesting the attacks on transgender people and Elon Musk's involvement in the federal government. The main focus of these protests are going to be at state capitals, federal buildings, congressional offices, and city centers. But I think they're going to be happening everywhere. So stay tuned. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Helping you win the water cooler wars. I'll be right back with your calls. Today's Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Harvey J. Kaye, Professor Harvey Kaye. Take hold of our history, make America radical again. This is from the introduction. On December 1st, 1862, in the midst of the Civil War, just weeks before he was to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, President Abraham Lincoln delivered his annual message to Congress. Lincoln firmly believed that the United States had an historic responsibility to demonstrate to the world that people can govern themselves, make equal rights not just a self-evident truth, but a manifest one, and create a political and economic order in which working people, both white and black, are not compelled to bow to anyone, neither aristocrats nor capitalists. Empowered by tens of thousands of black slaves who were already liberating themselves from bondage by escaping to the Union lines, and increasingly confident that the majority of his fellow Americans would recognize the truth of what he was saying, Lincoln closed his address by calling on them to see that the time had come to remember who they were and what they demanded, or what that demanded. He told them that to save the nation and all that it represented, they must live up to the nation's declared revolutionary purpose and promise, and act to radically enhance American freedom by bringing an end to slavery. This is a quote from Lincoln's address. Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We say we are for the Union. The world will not forget that we say this. We know how to save the Union. The world knows we do know how to save it. We, even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free, honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. We too, end of quote from Lincoln. Back to Harvey. We too cannot escape history. Our own struggle to save the nation and the promise it proclaims has begun. Finally, after more than 40 years of fear-driven class war and culture war campaigns against the democratic achievements of generations, the hard-won rights of workers, women and people of color, and the very memory of how they were secure, is secured. And now, both in the wake of the election debacle of 2016, which gave the presidency to the corrupt, mendacious, racist, sexist, and treacherous demagogue Donald Trump, and continued control of Congress to the formerly conservative but increasingly reactionary Republican Party, and in the face of intensified class and culture war campaigns, we the people have come not only to recognize that American democratic life is in jeopardy, but also to mobilize in hopes of saving it. Millions of us have rallied to the resistance and expressed our democratic fears and desires in action. In the historic Women's March and March for Our Lives of young people, the protests, demonstrations, and legal actions to defend the lives and rights of immigrants and refugees, the Me Too movement to combat sexual assault and harassment, the massive teacher strikes for higher pay and better funding of public schools in states red and blue, and the enthusiastic canvassing and campaigning for a blue wave to win back Congress in the 2018 midterm elections. But resistance is not enough. The time has come for us to remember who we are and what that demands. The time has come for us to embrace our radical history, the history of how a generation of Americans, high and low and in all their diversity, not only turned their colonial rebellion into a war for independence, but also imbued American life, whether they all intended it or not, with radical imperative and impulse by declaring a revolutionary promise of freedom, equality, and democracy for all. The history of how generations of radicals and reformers served as the prophetic memory of that promise, and how generations of ordinary men and women, native-born and immigrant, struggled to make real the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and to expand not only the we in We the People, but also the powers of the people. And most especially in view of the crises we ourselves face, the history of how our greatest generations confronted and prevailed over the forces that threatened to destroy the nation and bury its revolutionary promise in the 1770s, 1860s, and 1930s and 1940s, not to mention the 1960s, by acting to make the United States, both inspired by Washington, Lincoln, and FDR, and pushing them to go farther than they might otherwise have gone, radically freer, more equal, and more democratic than ever before. The time has come to take hold of that history and make America radical again. I've titled this collection of my speeches and essays, Take Hold of Our History, Make America Radical Again, for reasons that will become obvious, and yet I cannot help but confess that if I had had to title it otherwise, I would have been sorely tempted to use, with full attribution, the title Max Lerner gave to his 1938 work, It Is Later Than You Think, The Need for a Militant Democracy. While it may not seem so, the crisis we face is no less demanding of action, urgent action, than that which confronted his generation. The book Take Hold of Our History by Harvey J. Kaye. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you could be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Come gather round, let me tell you the score. The man in the White House is scheming for more. He pardons the guilty, he jails the poor. Oh, the times are in danger again. He stacks up the courts, he silences foes. The votes, they don't count when the strong men impose. Oh, the times are in danger again. So rise up, my friends,
So J.D. Vance comes out and says that this young man, he's 29 years old. He's the father, I believe, of an American citizen. He's the husband of an American citizen, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, 29 years old, who was wrongly deported to El Salvador. He's in the United States legally. And so J.D. Vance comes out and says, well, he's also committed some traffic violations. This is not exactly Father of the Year here. I think this is a person we shouldn't have in our country. And then when he was asked, well, why did you deport him? He said, we do not ask permission from far-left Democrats before we deport illegal immigrants. Right. Whatever happened to due process? What happened to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th Amendments to the Constitution? Well, really, I guess due process starts with the 5th, but this is amazing. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I don't know if we have a Democratic representative to be as ruthless as Donald Trump to get what he wants. We had a few occasions where a few, and I can't even believe, but I can understand. Donald Trump was a Democrat for a long time. Elon Musk was a Democratic supporter for a long time. So I know that there's some people in the Democratic Party that have the wherewithal to change the direction that this country is taking. Because I'm concerned that we don't realize what we're up against here dealing with Trump. He's completing his retribution against this country. He's pissed that he was indicted and had to sit in that courtroom. He's paying this country back. I don't care who it hurts. And I don't know if we have the people in our party that's willing to fight for the middle class and the lower class the way he's willing to fight for the upper class.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know.
Well, we've had them before. I mean, LBJ and FDR were real ass kickers.
Yeah.
Teddy Kennedy took it to them. We've had those folks before, and I think that they're starting to emerge. I think Cory Booker and his filibuster in the Senate.
Wonderful.
He did and said some really extraordinary things. Yeah, I think we're there. And I think that a lot of Democrats are starting to feel empowered. There's a tremendous sense of yes, we can do things. I'm actually at this moment a little optimistic, Tyrone, because these guys have just overstepped.
Yeah, my concern is that you think that you could work with these people on a human level. Say, you have to see what you're doing is hurting a lot of people. You have to understand.
I don't think that the Republicans. I don't think that you can appeal to empathy or understanding.
This is where I'm at.
These guys are sociopaths.
Yeah, so that's my concern is that you get in a room with these cats and you think you got to deal with them. Meanwhile, they walking out with a knife.
But Rand Paul, night before last, got up and said, back in 1930, we tried this. We put tariffs on, with Smoot-Hawley. We put a bunch of tariffs on people. And we lost the House and Senate and didn't get them back for 60 years. He's right. I mean, it wasn't until in 96, I think, that the Republicans, outside of 1-2 year period when Harry Truman was president, that the Republicans actually had a majority in the House of Representatives, for like 60 years. And so I guess the good news is the damage that Trump and Musk are doing is generational, and the backlash to it is going to be generational. This isn't going to be, I'm telling you, the election in a year and a half and the election in 3.5 years, assuming that we have them, and I think we will, those elections are going to be wipeouts. The Republicans are just going to be destroyed. I hope so. Yeah, I hope so too, Tyrone. Tyrone, I got to move along, but okay. Let's all keep a positive outlook here. Thanks a lot for the call. Good talking to you.
All right. Now.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
David in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Every now and then I come back to your book, Cracking the Code, and seeing how, like, Republicans, MAGA, and then people who bent the knee are talking. And the latest thing now that they do is the persecution complex. And I've got two examples. The first one was hilarious. Frank Luntz showed up on one of those roundtable shows on CNN a few weeks ago with his sad puppy dog eyes, saying, like, I feel like I'm an outsider at this table. You know, me, Trump, Musk. We're just humble people trying to do what's best for this country. And even the moderate,
Frank
even the
Luntz said
moderate,
that?
I know. Yeah, like even the moderate that sat in the table who's usually offended, or even the moderate was rolling his eyes like, come on, man. And then there's this, and then Dinesh D'Souza has some crazy competition coming down the pike. There's this movie coming up called, or so-called documentary coming up called October 8th. And Breaking Point showed a few clips from this upcoming travesty, and it has Sheryl Sandberg comparing her, dead serious, like Breaking Point showed.
This is the former CEO of Facebook, right?
Yeah. Sheryl Sandberg is going around comparing herself to Anne Frank.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, yes. Yeah. So Breaking Point showed the clip of October 8th, and I wish ghosts were real, because Anne Frank would be going around taking names and kicking ass. Yeah. You know, at stuff like that. So, but I'll take the rest of your commentary about this off the air. But anyway, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, good talking to you, David. That's insane. Thank you for sharing that. Dave in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I want to mention the China trade, if I could. Mm-hmm. The question I have is, how many Americans made millions or billions on their taking their products to China to be made, including maybe the current cabinet members and Elon Musk?
Yeah. Well, you could certainly start with Steve Jobs, but yeah.
Well, then I personally know of several people that have taken stuff over there, and one corporation from the United States that stole from a friend of mine because they were just good people and they made a good product, and they took it over to China and had it made and didn't pay that guy a penny. So I'm just saying that sometimes it isn't all Chinese. I don't know how many Chinese ended up to be billionaires from Americans going over there to trade with, but I would guess the main thing was the Americans going over to China to make their products so they could be billionaires.
Yeah. Well, there were quite a few, and I mean, you know, the thing I think we all need to remember is that this really all started with Reagan embracing neoliberalism. It was Ronald Reagan who oversaw the 1986 Uruguay round of the GATT talks, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, that laid the foundation for reducing tariffs right across the board around the world, and particularly in the United States. And then George Herbert Walker Bush, his vice president when he became president, negotiated NAFTA. You know, everybody blames Bill Clinton for NAFTA, but he just signed the damn thing. It was written and negotiated by the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, and the foundation of it was established by the Reagan administration. They were the guys who had embraced neoliberalism, who had said that, you know, Hayek and von Mises and all these guys, they were absolutely right that if everybody in the world traded with everybody else, there would be no more wars. Thomas Friedman tried to sell this with his book, The Olive Tree and the Lexus, and his whole McDonald's theory of warfare, that no two countries with McDonald's have ever gone to war with each other. That kind of got blown up when Russia invaded Ukraine, because they both had McDonald's. We need to remember where this came from and also what it is. So yeah, Dave, thank you very much. Spot on. Excellent point. It's 44 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with your calls in just a second. Stay with us. And welcome back. Rick in Sacramento. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Hey there. I have a quick question for you. Then I could tell you how Trump bankrupted his casinos.
Okay.
Anyway, the question is...
I'm guessing he bankrupted them by skimming money off the top, but that's just my guess.
That's part of it, but it's more... There's a bigger thing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, did he impose tariffs on intellectual property imported from the Cayman Islands? Because companies like Facebook have subsidiaries there that own their logos. So if they make $10 billion profit in the U.S., that subsidiary charges them $6 or $8 or $10 billion for the use of the logo, and so they pay the income tax in Cayman Islands, which has very low or no tax.
Right. That's fascinating.
So we could get 25% of that.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and the Cayman Islands, by the way, you don't. There's no property taxes and there's no income taxes, which is amazing on the one hand. On the other hand, there's no public school system. If you want your kids to go to school.
There's one office building there that has over about 20,000 companies registered at that one address.
Exactly. And
so anyway,
it's
Trump
funding the island.
Trump bankrupted his casinos. When he bought them, they came with a management team that had decades of experience running casinos. Mm-hmm. But he was smarter than them. So he wanted to run the casinos his way.
Right.
And that's what drove him into the ground.
Well, what specific business decisions did he make? I mean, how did things change that caused that to happen?
Well, comps for one thing. He was flying people on helicopters down to from New York to Atlantic City. But when you comp people at a casino, you want to comp people who have some money and a gambling problem. You don't want necessarily to get people with a lot of money because they like to hold on to their money. Mm-hmm. So when you overcomp people who are not losing money at your casino, you're losing money.
Yeah. Amazing. All
right. Another thing about China.
Yeah.
One of the first things that Nixon sold to China was 3 Boeing 707s. 3 years later, China had an airplane that they built that looked exactly like a 707, but it weighed twice as much.
Wow. So they just reverse engineered it.
Yeah, they just took it apart, built the parts, but they didn't have the metallurgy to make the aluminum alloys light enough to make it a viable airplane.
Huh. Interesting. Rick, thanks for that. Thanks for the information. Tom in Los Angeles. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Tom.
What's on your mind?
I was just thinking about the Cory Booker speech.
Uh-huh.
And you see, I'm just not sure if you could call that a filibuster because, I think I wasn't really sure if he was filibustering one thing or another. But
yeah, it wasn't to stop a specific piece of legislation. That's a good point.
Right. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, as a spectator, it feels like all it is just that spectacle. In the face of what we're up against, especially today with the, economic meltdown, and ICE kidnapping people off the street in Boston, where I happen to be from, I took that very personally, and I don't hear the Democrats really having a spine on this, except for just speaking for 25 hours and asking for donations.
Well, they do need to be fighting back harder. I'll give you that, Tom, and more of them need to be involved. Tom, thanks for the call. 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in just a minute. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So what do we call the really, really mind-bogglingly rich? At the founding of the Republic, they were referred to as speculators or moneyed interest or aristocrats. In the years leading up to the Civil War, we called them the cotton lords and the plantation aristocracy. In the late 19th century, they were the robber barons. In the 1930s, FDR called them the economic royalists. But since the Reagan Revolution, we've just called them billionaires. And now, some of them want to call themselves tech bros, like That's kind of a good thing, like tech is positive and bros, like Mark Zuckerberg saying we need more masculine energy in American business culture. So we need a new phrase. I would like to suggest the morbidly rich. Morbidly suggests unhealthy. And the vast riches that some of these people have is unhealthy to our democracy, particularly since 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that morbidly rich people can buy politicians. And it's unhealthy for them, too. So morbidly rich. There's an op-ed over at HartmannReport.com all about it. Check it out.
It started back in '64, a whisper in the halls, Goldwater's warning call behind the country's walls. Stormer's book was passed around, fear was set in stone. The rich men lit the torches, claimed the Reds would take our home. They sold the fear, they sold the lie, wrapped in flags and battle cries. The GOP's long game, 60 years in disguise, selling fear to the people, feeding power to the lies. They call it safe.
51 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Mark in South Bend, Indiana. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing?
Good. What's up?
You hit a real good point yesterday about that Wisconsin Supreme Court election. You went on to say the money that came in and mostly through Musk and that, and the $1 million checks and everything was made possible from Buckley, Bellotti. You went on to say Citizens United, but I think Buckley and Bellotti was enough for that to happen in Wisconsin and elsewhere throughout elections. It
would have been a start. Buckley didn't give. Buckley basically, that decision in 1986 basically said that wealthy people. James Buckley was a United States senator, and he was running for the Senate. William F. Buckley's brother, and they were a very rich family. And he wanted to fund his own campaign, and he couldn't. He was limited to only giving himself $3,000. And so that was what that case ruled, was that if you are running for Congress, you can use your own money. And that's why for several decades, Republicans looked for rich people to run for Congress, because those rich people could pour lots of their own money into campaigns. So they could even borrow money and pour it in as if it was their own money, and then have that money repaid to them through campaign contributions acquired after they came into office. So it really, the doors really got kicked open. Not so much with Buckley and Bellotti, but I mean, Bellotti allowed corporations to do the same. But really, the big door kicking was Citizens United in 2010. And if you look at big money donations, I mean, we didn't get billion-dollar campaigns until after 2010.
The other thing I want to talk to you about is tariffs. You hit the hammer on the head. You don't go just going after countries on tariffs. You go after manufactured items.
That's correct.
Or syntax if bad things are coming into your country. You can hit them with a tariff. You mentioned about coffee. We import about 99% of our coffee. Hawaii makes a very small amount of it.
Correct.
We also import most of our chocolate and cocoa. We do have, we import all of that. And so does Europe. And we also import a lot of sugar and rice. We probably between 60 to 70% of that is imported.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of food processing that's going to get hit high with these high tariffs, and the working class poor are going to starve.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. He's just doing it wrong. He's doing tariffs the way you do tariffs during time of war. You put tariffs on countries. And the correct way to do tariffs is to put tariffs on products. You identify the products you want to continue to manufacture in the United States, and you tariff those things. It's crazy that, if we're tariffing everything coming out of Mexico, we're tariffing Mexican coffee. That's going to raise, that's just going to drive inflation in the United States. The price of coffee is going to go up in every restaurant in America. How does that help American manufacturing? It doesn't. How does that help American agriculture? Maybe a little bit in Hawaii, but the Hawaii coffee production is so negligible compared to the grand scale of U.S. coffee consumption that it's meaningless. So yeah, spot on. Mark, thank you. Well said. Don in Watertown, South Dakota. Hey, Don, what's up? Hey.
Hi, Tom. I was just curious, if the GOP legislature says this session is just one long day, how can you swear in 2 new representatives to Congress when, according to their own timeline, the election hasn't happened yet?
I don't know. I've got to get a member of Congress to explain this to me, because I don't understand how Mike Johnson can say, oh yeah, from now until I don't know if it would be October 1st, the beginning of the new fiscal year, or whether it would be January 3rd, I guess, is the beginning of the new year for Congress. But to say that from now until then is only one day legislatively, and which he has done. And, he's doing it so that he can do some slick little tricks on the floor of the House. But how he pulls this off, or, what the meaning of it is, I don't know, Don. It's something I have to educate myself about. And I will share it with you when I figure it out. But right now, I don't know.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good talking to you, Don. Thank you. Joe in Villa Park, Illinois. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Before I talk to you about tariffs, I wanted to let you know you'd be proud to know that I'm a member of a slate of candidates that took control of the York Township Democrats from the Republicans that they've held since 1850.
Very cool, Joe. Well done.
We took every seat on the ballot.
That's great.
We had a candidate.
We just have a few seconds left, though. What's your question?
Real quick, no, about tariffs. Back in the 80s, Harley Davidson was owned by AMF, the bowling ball people. So they were not able to overcome the Japanese motorcycle manufacturers dumping bikes on the market.
Right.
The descendants of the original founders bought the company and convinced Congress to put 100% tariff to allow them to build the brand. And now look at how Harley Davidson's doing today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Although, didn't they move their manufacturing to Mexico?
Just recently, but originally they were in Milwaukee and York, PA.
Yeah, I think they moved out of the country like in the last 5 years or 10 years or something like that. I remember when it happened. Joe, thanks for the call. Spot on. That's how you do it. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This is an 1856 first English translation edition of this author. And but you can still get it online. A lot of different booksellers sell it. This is from chapter 11. What sort of despotism democratic nations have to fear? I had remarked during my stay in the United States that a democratic state of society, similar to that of the Americans, might offer singular facilities for the establishment of despotism. And I perceived, upon my return to Europe, how much use had already been made by most of our rulers of the notions, the sentiments, and the wants engendered by this same social condition for the purpose of extending the circle of their power. This led me to think that the nations of Christendom would perhaps eventually undergo some sort of oppression like that which hung over several of the nations of the ancient world. But it would seem that if despotism were to be established among the democratic nations of our days, it might assume a different character, different from the Roman Empire, for example. It might be more extensive and more mild. It would degrade men without tormenting them. I do not question that in an age of instruction and equality like our own, sovereigns might more easily succeed in collecting all political power into their own hands and might interfere more habitually and decidedly within the circle of private interests than any sovereign of antiquity ever could do. But the same principle of equality which facilitates despotism tempers its rigor. When no member of the community has much power or much wealth, tyranny is, as it were, without opportunities or a field of action. As all fortunes are scanty, the passions of men are naturally circumscribed, their imagination limited, their pleasures simple. This universal moderation moderates the sovereign himself and checks within certain limits the inordinate stretch of his own desires. Independently of these reasons, drawn from the nature of the state of society itself, I might add many others arising from causes beyond my subject, but I shall keep within the limits I have laid down to myself. Democratic governments may become violent and even cruel at certain periods of extreme effervescence or of great danger. Excuse me, think of George Bush and 9/11. But these crises will be rare and brief. When I consider the petty passions of our contemporaries, the mildness of their manners, the extent of their education, the purity of their religion, the gentleness of their morality, their regular and industrious habits, and the restraint with which they almost all observe in their vices, no less than in their virtues, I have no fear that they will meet with tyrants in their rulers, but rather guardians. I think then that the species of oppression by which democratic nations are menaced is unlike anything that ever existed before in our world. Our contemporaries will find no prototype of it in their memories. I am trying myself to choose an expression which will accurately convey the whole of the idea I have formed of it, but in vain. The old words, despotism and tyranny, are inappropriate. The thing itself is new, and since I cannot name it, I must attempt to define it. I seek to trace the novel features under which despotism may appear in the world. The first thing that strikes the observation is an immutable multitude of men, all equal and alike, incessantly endeavoring to procure the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. Think now of a television society. Each of them, living apart, is as a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is close to them, but he sees them not. He touches them, but he feels them not. He exists, but in himself and for himself alone. And if his kindred still remain to him, he may be said at any rate to have lost his country. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure their gratifications and to watch over their fate. Facebook? That power is absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood, but it seeks, on the contrary, to keep them in perpetual childhood. It is well content that people should rejoice, providing that they think of nothing but rejoicing. For their happiness, such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and only arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies their necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their industry, regulates the descent of property, and subdivides their inheritances. What remains but to spare them all the care of thinking and all the trouble of living? Thus, it every day renders the exercise of the free agency of man less useful and less frequent. It circumscribes the will within a narrower range and gradually robs a man of all the uses of himself. The principle of equality has prepared men for these things. It has predisposed men to endure them and oftentimes to look on them as benefits. I have always thought that the servitude of the regular, quiet, and gentle kind, which I have just described, might be combined more easily than is commonly believed with some of the outward forms of freedom, and that it might even establish itself under the wing of the sovereign of the people. Our contemporaries are constantly excited by two conflicting passions. They want to be led, and they wish to remain free. As they cannot destroy either one or the other of these contrary propensities, they strive to satisfy them both at once. They devise a sole, tutelary, and all-powerful form of government, but elected by the people. They combine the principle of centralization and that of popular sovereignty. This gives them a respite. They console themselves for being in tutelage by the reflection that they have chosen their own guardians. And it continues. It's a brilliant book. A Democracy in America by de Tocqueville.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome back to the second hour of the program. On the line with us is our old friend Phil Ittner. Phil is you got to kill those speakers. Phil is a veteran war correspondent based out of Kyiv, Ukraine, and host of the On the Edge podcast, fine podcast. He also has a YouTube blog. You can find it with Philip Ittner. Ittner Philip over on Blue Sky. Phil, welcome back to the program. So, Russian strategic bomber crashes. Putin remains unwilling to commit to a general ceasefire. What's going on there today?
Not only that, apparently he's going to call up 160,000 more conscripts. Now, he says those aren't going to be used in combat in Ukraine, but rather as a backfill in the Russian Federation. But we've heard that kind of language before. So it looks as though the Kremlin has absolutely no interest in pursuing any kind of ceasefire or a peace deal. Nevertheless, aside from some strong language from President Trump, it doesn't look like the White House is going to apply any pressure anytime soon either.
Right. Are they still bombing Kyiv?
We had our first night of no attacks 2 nights ago, which was nice. I normally sleep through them nowadays, as many of us who live in Kiev do, actually. But generally, yes, we still come under. I mean, there were 2 alarms today, for example, warning us that there was an attack, and they don't put out those warnings, without cause. Right. One other thing to note this week, and this is a kind of a difficult topic, especially since I spent the day today filming the episode for this Sunday's publication of On the Edge. And our topic this week is noting that this is the 3-year anniversary of the liberation of Bucha. And so that was the nature of our guest. And so I spent the day discussing some absolutely harrowing stories.
A story that the
occupation of Bucha,
a city that
of what the Russians did.
Yeah.
Well, what the Russians did when they occupied a kind of an upper middle class suburb of Kiev called Bucha. And they occupied a whole series of towns up there, and they committed war crime after war crime. But it's Bucha that has kind of taken the mantle of the name that is synonymous now of Russian war crimes. And it's to hear the stories, it's devastating, and it is atrocious what the Russians have done. And we're not holding them to account. Even today, we heard an announcement from an international body researching and pursuing these cases of war crimes, that the United States has decided to leave that body of that investigative body. So we are in so many different ways letting down the Ukrainians. And I got to tell you, Tom, having spent the afternoon talking to the subject who relayed the stories of what the Russians did while they occupied these territories, it's almost criminal negligence that the United States is removing itself from this, because these are war crimes, the measure of which, equate with Rwanda. They equate with Srebrenica. They equate with these names of places where we keep saying never again, and yet it seems like Moscow gets a pass.
Yeah, I want you to relate some of those stories. Although first I wanted to note that it was 2-3 days ago we reported here on this program that the Trump administration shut down the office, and I don't recall if it was DOD or DOJ, that was investigating the children who had been kidnapped by Russians and taken out of Ukraine and back to Russia to be sold into, God only knows what. Tell us some of the stories that you heard about what happened in Bucha.
Well, I'll sanitize it slightly because some of these things are really, really horrific. But, the discovery of a trench line alongside a church in Bucha where 28 bodies were found beside a series of tiling that the Ukrainians surmised was going to be used once the mass grave was covered over, that they would put these stones there to make it even more difficult to find the victims of their cruelty. Descriptions of, corpses of babies that had been killed in either by the use of a weapon or, and again, I apologize for the graphic nature of this, but burnt alive. People who were trying to escape the occupation were fired on without regard for whether or not they were military or civilian. And so bodies of, the bodies of entire families found in bullet-ridden vehicles, people found on the street having just stepped out to go get medicine or cigarettes or food were stopped and executed, shot execution style, hands tied behind their back. They came into the city. They insisted that the so-called Nazis were given up to them. And when the leadership of the city said, well, we don't have Nazis, that's Russian propaganda that you've been fed, they were so resistant to accepting that they'd been lied to that they took out their aggression on the leadership in the city in ways that I'm not comfortable relaying verbally. It was hard enough to hear it today.
Wow.
These are
mass
crimes,
rapes as well.
Rape used as a weapon of terror. I really never wanted to see another war, Tom.
Yeah.
I've had a belly full of war.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing this for most of your life. It's too important. Yeah.
I've been doing it for 30 years, and I had hoped to retire and sit at my little lake home in Michigan, put my toes in the water and forget about all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'll carry this with me for the rest of my life. We manage it. I'm very well aware of mental health needs and how to care for oneself as best one can. But man, I wish I'd never seen another war. But this is too important, Tom. What's happening in Ukraine is too important to go unnoticed, to happen in the shadows, to let the Russians get away with what they're getting away with, to let them, act this way in this cruel and aggressive manner. It's unforgivable, and it can't be done in the shadows. And again, this is where I get critical of our press corps. This should be on the front page of every newspaper, at the banner of every website. This should be something that we should be talking about, ad infinitum, and also with the idea that it cannot go unpunished.
Yeah.
That the crimes can't go unanswered, and that Moscow can't simply walk away from this. To get some sort of unfair peace where the perpetrators of these atrocious crimes are not held to account, at least in some way, shape, or form, would be only inviting it to happen again. And so this idea that we must have peace no matter what, that Donald Trump seems to be pushing, that let's just get it all behind us. Well, we'd love to get it all behind us. We'd love to put this in the rearview mirror, but not without cause, not without a just peace. And that's what I hear from Ukrainians time and time again, who are exhausted of this war just as I am. But this is their home. It's different. I could conceivably leave, except for my sense of obligation to the place. But, the fact that the Trump administration seems to be willing to let the Kremlin get away with this as long as stability and peace comes in, which, again, is something we all want, but to do it without repercussion is completely irresponsible.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that the war crimes that you're documenting were not a few bad apples in the Russian army, including rape as an instrument of war. These were, and the killing of civilians. These were orders from on high. This is how the Russian army rolls right now under Vladimir Putin. And then just parenthetically, Donald Trump just put tariffs on pretty much every country in the world except for Russia and Belarus and North Korea. He exempted those three from even the 10% universal tariff he put on everything imported in the United States. And we're still importing Russian goods. We've brought in $3.5 billion worth of Russian goods so far this year. I think it's probably mostly oil products. There's something going on here between Trump and Putin. I don't get it.
100%. And the fact that they're even now talking about is one of the conditions of a ceasefire or a peace that Washington and Trump would allow the entire Russian diplomatic corps, which contains, a vast percentage of them are spies and infiltrators and people who intend to cause us harm, that they just get the slate cleaned. I don't understand it. I don't understand why that would be especially with the crimes that are committed here. But the relationship between Washington and Moscow, as you mentioned, is very suspicious. And I really think we need to start taking all of this.
Hardly a strong enough word, Phil. Phil Ittner, the great Phil Ittner. Check out his On the Edge podcast, wherever fine podcasts are available. Phil, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom.
Always great talking with you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 17 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Joe in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Not much, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just got my sign out front for my neighbors that says, "I tried to warn you."
Really? I tried to warn you. I love it.
Some of them really have all of their savings in 401ks, and I know they're boohooing right now because they said the market was going to go great, blazing guns when Trump got in.
Yeah.
So I'm
like
going to be subtle and
right?
not stressful. Yeah. Just back on that, who was supposed to be on that war chat? It was Jameson Greer. He's a cabinet member. He's our U.S. trade representative, and he's ex-Air Force. And because the dolt Waltz was using initials, he picked up JG, thinking it was Jameson Greer when he picked up, Godfrey and
Jeffrey Goldberg.
Leaked it to the press. Yeah, to Jeffrey Goldberg. Sorry, yeah. A heads up quickly for any of your listeners out there that either pay the IRS or get refunds from the IRS or get their Social Security payments by check.
Mm-hmm.
In September, they will no longer be taking checks or sending checks from the Treasury. That was another orange nightmare executive order that he signed on the 25th that a lot of people missed. But they will... And it'll affect about 500,000 Social Security recipients. Some of those older people have been on it a while. They've always just expected that check in the mailbox. Well, come September, you better tell someone if they're older or if they're getting their Social Security by check, it's going to be cut off in September.
Everything has to be direct deposit.
It has to be direct deposit, which I think for a lot of people is just not how they've lived their lives. Right. They kind of are check-oriented.
And I understand that in order to change to direct deposit, they will no longer allow you to do that with the website or over the telephone. You have to show up in person.
That's right. Now, lastly, I'll leave you with this one because I thought it was very interesting. I think you will too. If you remember here just recently, Skadden Arps, the big law firm that just quote-unquote caved to Trump, giving him $100 million worth of free legal help. Mm-hmm. What a lot of people don't know is Skadden Arps has a long history of representing Putin, Putin's oligarchs, Alpha Bank, and they had to pay a $4.6 million fine to the U.S. authorities years back regarding lobbying. The lobbying that they were paying oligarchs and their influencers to do in Ukraine against the democracy.
Oh, really?
So, and guess who their middleman was? Wait for the drum roll. Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
Yep, was the go-between between Skadan and the Russian banking people and the oligarchs and Putin, and they've been involved in about $90 billion worth of business. So when I remembered that name and they were going to cave to Trump, maybe it wasn't a cave, but it was just a public cave because they were going to give him $100 million in free legal help.
Right.
So these money routes go so far into this political system, it's insane.
Yeah, and apparently Putin and oligarch money routes too. I mean that's wild. That's absolutely wild.
Yeah, and that's what Trump wants here at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, he wants style government.
He's trying to establish oligarchy. There's no doubt about it, and we're 3/4 of the way down the road. Joe, thanks for the call. That was fascinating. Appreciate it. 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Is war coming? Is Trump getting ready to attack Iran? I'll tell you about that in just a second. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
The echoes of history call our name. A world divided, a deadly game. From Kiev streets to the western shore, freedom's cry we can't ignore. Will we stand and hold the line against the shadows' dark design? Their fight for justice is not alone. The fight for Ukraine's future is our own. Rise up, for liberty's flame. The cost is high, but we'll shoulder the blame. Against the tyrants, against the throne, the fight for Ukraine's future is our own.
Welcome back. So a war is coming. Where will the blow fall first? Asks Malcolm Nance over on his Substack newsletter, malcolmnance.substack.com. And I was completely unaware of this, and I consume a mind-boggling amount of media. And this is, I mean, he writes, the Trump regime quietly, and apparently incredibly quietly, started moving about 1/3 of America's strategic bomb force from its home base in Missouri to a secret remote airstrip in the middle of the Indian Ocean called Diego Garcia. In late March, a mass of U.S. Air Force in-flight refueling tankers were seen staging all across the Pacific Ocean from California. This indicated that an air armada was being formed and needed nonstop in-flight refueling. Within a day, 6 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers were detected landing at Diego Garcia in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So where would you bomb from Diego Garcia? Turns out, Iran. Trump sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader, writes Malcolm Nance, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, demanding they stop developing nuclear weapons and return to the negotiating table. Iran rejected that proposal out of hand, quoting the Signal app scandal, noting that Trump's cabinet says one thing in public while plotting something else in private. So here we are. Trump, of course, famously blew up the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, back in 2017. And Nance notes that Netanyahu has likely convinced Trump that now is the time to strike the Iranian nuclear weapons program once and for all, which is why we're positioning these B-52s. And then he goes on to add the U.S. just deployed over 100 additional combat aircraft to the theater to support an attack. He also ordered the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson to depart its deployment in Asia and head at top speed to the Arabian Gulf. It's going to arrive in about 2 weeks, and when it does, all the pieces will be in place for what could be the beginning of World War III. 2 minutes. He writes, if this attack is carried out, the entire Middle East will be set on fire. Iran has some options, and one of them is to strike Saudi Arabia, which is our ally. The Iranians would also shut the Gulf, between the little choke point between Iran to the north and Oman to the south, stopping all fuel trade out of the Gulf. So you could see the price of oil go to $150, $200 a barrel overnight, which would give us, $10, $15 a gallon gasoline. This, and then J.D. Vance visited the U.S. Space Force base in Putvik, Greenland, with his wife Usha, and said, "Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. This has to change." And Trump explicitly did not rule out military force against Greenland. Now, it looks like he's actively preparing for an assault, for a strike on Iran. And, the Iranians are no dummies, and they control a lot of proxies, around the Middle East, and this will be a real mess. But he's also suggested that he might, park an aircraft carrier off the coast of Greenland and say, "This is ours now." Putin can take Ukraine, we can take Greenland, which of course would cause Xi to say, "Well, then I can take Taiwan," right? And then, depending on how and who responds, like I said, we could be in the middle of World War III. This could be a real mess. And you'll recall, I've talked before about Strauss and Howe and how they point out every 80 years you have a depression followed by a war. In 1871, you had a great crash that was followed by 1771. That was followed by 1776 and our war with England. 80 years later, we had the crash of 1856 here in the United States, a widespread depression that led straight to the Civil War in the 1860s. 80 years later, we had the Republican Great Depression followed by World War II. And it's now been 80 years since the end of World War II. So get ready. Meanwhile, a Trump critic and Nobel Peace Prize winner just got his U.S. visa revoked. I'll tell you about that after the break, and I'll pick up your calls. Stay with us. It's the Thom Hartmann program, defending America from the weapons of mass deception. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll be right back. Stick around. Today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club is Trump U, Promises, Lies, and Corruption, My Battle with Donald Trump's Fake University by Art Cohen with Dan Good. This is from Chapter 1, The Art and the Deal. I was in a vulnerable place. I found myself jobless in early 2009 after my consumer electronics company went through a forced sale. I'd poured my life into Ariel Inc. You might remember our AudioBug FM transmitters, ladybug-shaped devices that aired music from portable devices over a car radio. After Apple's iPod became all the rage, we developed, manufactured, and licensed products for major retailers and brands such as Best Buy's Dynex, Iriver, Kensington, SanDisk, XM Radio, and Delphi. Later, we looked to expand our wireless music transmission offerings with our own i21 brand, working seamlessly with the debut in 2007 of a new iPhone. Everything was going well until it wasn't. The consumer electronics industry was hit hard by the 2008 recession. Our major investor wanted to restructure the company and install new management. I was out as CEO in 2009. I wanted to find something new and fast. It wasn't a great time to be unemployed. The national economy was tanking, and to top it off, Silicon Valley isn't a cheap place to live. I worried about providing for my wife and two sons. At age 44, I found myself at a crossroads, an inflection point in my career. After spending 5 years as a CEO, I wanted to do something different and carve a new path. And then I came across a special invitation in the mail and a full-page ad in the San Jose Mercury News promoting an opportunity. Do you think you can profit in this market? You can, and I'll show you how, proclaimed the advertiser's headline underneath a photo of real estate developer Donald Trump. The ad promised the opportunity to learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked experts. He's the most celebrated entrepreneur on earth. He's earned more in a day than most people do in a lifetime. He's living a life many men and women only dream about, and now he's ready to share with Americans like you the Trump process for investing in today's once-in-a-lifetime real estate market. Come to this free introductory class, and you'll learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked instructors a systematic method for investing in real estate that anyone can use effectively. You'll learn foreclosure investing from the inside out. You'll learn how to finance your deals using other people's money. You'll learn how to overcome your fear of getting started. End quote. The ad featured a guarantee attributed to the man himself. I can turn anyone into a successful real estate investor, including you. So, why not me? Donald Trump was a name I trusted. I grew up in Philadelphia, less than 100 miles from Trump's home base, New York City, so I was familiar with his success as a real estate developer and as an author of the 1987 bestseller, The Art of the Deal. I'd made the hour-long drive to Atlantic City, New Jersey a couple times, and his last name was splashed across the casinos, T-R-U-M-P, and flashing lights. I consider the name Trump synonymous with success and wealth. At least that's what it meant for me back then. During the mid-'80s, while a student at Drexel University, I was one of the co-founding members of the D-Users, widely acknowledged as the first Macintosh users group. I was invited to a Hollywood-style event called Going National, hosted by Drexel on its campus. There, I met the legendary Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple. His inspiring talk that day imagined future computers using artificial intelligence to have conversations with the dead. Not literally, but using inputs known about, for example, Abraham Lincoln. The AI would bring Lincoln to life so you could have a modern-day conversation with him as if he were alive today. Jobs' talk inspired me to lead a team tasked during a competition with imagining the personal computer of the year 2000. There we were, to present our vision with an impressive panel. Science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, futurist Alvin Toffler, education writer and historian Diane Ravitch, computer pioneer Alan Kay, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. A team from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign won the competition. They envisioned a tablet device that sounded an awful lot like the eventual iPad. During a luncheon, I got to sit at a table with Bradbury, and we began talking. He was amiable. He told me how his writing career didn't take off right away. He kept at it, day by day, year by year, and eventually success and fame found him. I love science fiction, and Fahrenheit 451 is one of my favorite books. Besides my father, Bradbury probably inspired me more than anyone else as a writer, something I enjoy doing in my spare time. The Project 2000 contest was beneficial in another way. It allowed me to connect with Apple employees and give them my resume. By 1989, I was moving to California as an Apple employee. I worked as an engineer at Apple until the mid-'90s, during the time before Steve Jobs returned to the company. I left to join a company called General Magic, where I worked on product and project management. During my time there, I bumped into a French-born computer programmer who said his wife came up with an idea about selling stuff from around the house online. Everybody laughed about it. I guess Pierre Omidyar got the last laugh. His creation, Auction Web, was later renamed eBay and became one of the world's leading e-commerce companies. I bounced around several tech companies in Silicon Valley, including Coraco, Oracle, and Philips Semiconductors. At one point, I tried my hand at law school, taking classes at night. Philips was picking up the tab. Classes were challenging and my head wasn't in it. It was a big commitment and I ended up only going for a year. My passion remained with high tech. After moving to California, I didn't keep close tabs on Donald Trump. I wasn't aware of his casino empire cratering or his massive, massive debt. The book is Trump U by Art Cohen with Dan Good. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these weird, they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, you know, their ultimate talking document does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, you know, just they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the First, Fourth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out.
I walked in the door, they said, watch what you say. But I knew the truth don't matter anyway. First thing I did, tore the watchdogs down. Said the deep state was out to take my crown. CIA, FBI, I called them a joke. Truth's just a fire, and I love the smoke. Took their reports, threw them in the bin, 'cause facts don't count when you know you can spend. Oh, it's good to be king, don't need no rules.
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour. So Oscar Arias Sanchez, the former president of Costa Rica, which has no army. Costa Rica won the Nobel, and everybody in Costa Rica has free health care, and everybody in Costa Rica can go to college all the way through. I've told the story many times. Louise and I had a family vacation, and with my brother and one of my brothers and his family down in Costa Rica. We rented a house, and the taxi driver who drove us out there from the airport was telling us how proud he was. His son had just graduated from medical school with his MD and was starting to practice in one of the big hospitals. And I was like, he didn't quite say it out loud like this, but how does a taxi driver put his son through medical school? And he told us it's free. It's absolutely free. So anyhow, Oscar Arias Sanchez, he won the Nobel Prize for back in the 80s, I believe it was, for dialing back the civil wars that were happening across Central America, principally Honduras and Guatemala. And he has a green card, or a visa, excuse me. He has a visa to visit the United States, and the Trump administration just revoked his visa. Why? Well, because he's been a, quote, vocal critic of Donald Trump. So he came out and he said, if someone wants to punish me in the hopes of silencing me, this isn't going to work. He said he compared Trump to a, quote, Roman emperor telling the rest of the world what to do. Yeah, you think? So what's on your mind today? Tim in Shelby Township, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Greetings from Macomb County.
Oh, yeah.
Just to let you know first, my wife and I attended the town hall for the 10th Congressional District we had here in Macomb. It was John James' district. Naturally, he didn't show up.
He's a Republican?
And yes, he is. And he's owned and operated by the DeBoss family.
Oh,
who
geez.
paid for all of his campaigns. He ran for both Senate seats in the past year. Mm-hmm. And then 4 years ago, or 3 years ago now, he won the congressional seat in the 10th district, even though he didn't live in here.
Yeah.
And now he has abandoned us completely. He has moved out to Grand Rapids, him and his family, with the rumor that he's either going to run for the open Senate seat or more likely the governor's seat in Michigan next election.
Oh, interesting. And therefore, he can't afford to do a town hall. It would look bad.
He has no use for us.
Yeah.
Why come back and bother with it?
Yeah.
But anyway, and our speakers there were Chris Murphy, Maxwell Frost, and Dana Netzel. All gave fire-burning speeches, as Luis's song just
That's great. Does Maxwell Frost represent Michigan?
No, he's
I thought he was
the
from
youngest
Florida.
rep, and he is.
Yeah, okay.
But he is doing town halls across the country.
God bless
Chris
him.
Murphy's doing town halls, and Chris Murphy had invited him to ours.
Oh, that's
and Curtis Hertel, who is our new Democratic lead in the state of Michigan, has said that this is the first of they're going to every district where there's a Republican who refuses to do a town hall and hold a town hall with anyone that's willing to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, reason I called was the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
6 or 8 years I've just been saying Trump is stupid. He doesn't understand tariffs, something anyone who takes an Econ 101 class will understand.
Yeah.
But I think there's a sinister backdrop to this, that by putting on these tariffs, what they're going to do is collect an enormous amount of sales tax on everything that we have, everything we purchase that's imported in.
Right, and he wants to use this to pay for his tax cuts for billionaires.
Exactly. It's going straight to the Treasury, and that's what's going to bulk it up, where they're just going to, again, the middle and working class are going to pay for an enormous amount of money just going into the pockets of the rich.
Yeah, I alternate between thinking that Trump is intentionally sabotaging our economy on behalf of Vladimir Putin and President Xi, who want to see the West crippled, right, economically. An economic depression that would distract us from Ukraine and Taiwan and everything else. Exactly what these guys would love. On the one hand, or on the other hand, if Trump is just doing this to pay, he's just desperately trying to find $4.5 trillion, whether it means laying off, national security people, disease preventing people, cancer cure finding people. They're gutting our government, and we know that, a large part of that is to pay for the tax breaks for billionaires. It's just astonishing. So. Yeah.
Or all of the above.
Yeah. It may well be. In fact, that makes a lot of sense. Tim, thank you for the call.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, good talking to you. Dave in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. Hey, Dave, what's up? Thanks for listening to WCPT.
Hey, Tom. I read article, the story about American veterans fighting in Ukraine are struggling with the politics of abandonment, and there was a couple of them, in the story, they say hundreds of Americans have fought in Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion began. 50 have been killed, and of the 50, 40 of whom were former U.S. service members.
Wow.
One of these sons the story got me, this veteran, he's gotten hate mail and death threats from Russians and self-described MAGA Republicans in the U.S. since he began publicly criticizing Trump's approach to ending the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Some of these guys say that I'm a traitor, and if he ever comes back to the States, they're going to kill him, telling him they hope he'll die there, and they'll say they hope he comes home as ashes in a box. Really good Christian values, huh?
That's incredible.
And some of the veterans, they think that they find most distressing is that there are some voices in the U.S. and in positions of power that can't come to the realization that Russia, no matter what it says, is diametrically opposed to the American way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And they just find the stuff with the Americans' alliance with Russia is inherently nonsensical.
Yeah.
And lastly, these veterans who spoke in this article, there was a couple. I just wanted to go with that one about threatening them and that. And they linked the dangers of the current situation in Ukraine to the consequences of the failed 2021 withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, and fear it could be a repeat if Trump were to permanently sever support to Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, then the question becomes, can Europe fill that gap? And I'm not sure that anybody knows the answer to that question, but certainly the French and the British, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, are pretty outspoken that they're willing to throw themselves into the breach.
Yeah, I figured I'd coattail on Phil Ittner, though, like when he was talking about all those atrocities and that, too. And nobody's talked much about our veterans that have been fighting, the Americans that have been fighting over there lately. So.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up, Dave. I appreciate it. Good to hear from you. Thank you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. back. Mike in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a couple things. One is about Trump, is that you don't have to look far for his motivations. They're all, how can he get richer?
Yeah.
That's bottom line.
So
And
how does he
sometimes
get
that's
richer
hard.
from imposing tariffs on other countries?
Oh, it's not over yet. There's going to be a trade war. He's going to have try to blackmail somebody into paying him more money. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Well, that's
And-
already
and I think
happening. He's got half the major corporations in America have shoveled money at him, and now he's charging $1 million each to have dinner with him at Mar-a-Lago if you're a CEO. So
a few years ago, The Economist published the results of a study someone had done that actually just sort of confirmed common sense, and that's that rich people never can get rich enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one reason he wants to establish the sovereign wealth fund. Yeah. So he'll have money to play with. There'll be other people's money, so he can make money with that.
Yeah.
But at any rate, the other thing, I agree with your statement about us needing to test Democrats, needing to take a firmer stance with our terminology. For instance, the morbidly rich. I love that term because it actually gives you the moral quality of their wealth. Okay. But I want to suggest that we stop using the term trickle-down economics for what they keep trying to do with giving the rich tax breaks, and start calling it what it actually is, which is golden shower economics. It's a lot of hooey.
Yeah, what I say is, trickle-down economics turns us all into a nation of peons.
Exactly. Very good. So we're on the same.
Yeah, I've been using that one for years. It's pretty
well,
good.
I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I'll start using that one more if you start using mine more.
Okay, you got it. Mike, thanks for the call.
All right.
Great to hear from you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Pam in Carrollton, Ohio. Hey, Pam, what's up?
Hi, Tom. This is Pam. I only have two questions. One you already answered before, but I had already silenced the TV. But it is about, how does Johnson call the whole year a day? And the second one was, since Trump wants everyone to bring their businesses back to the U.S., has he brought back his clothes and ties business? Thank you.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
that's interesting. I had forgotten about that. So I just found an article in Politico during the break that explains what Mike Johnson did and how he did it, but I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet. I'm sorry. We've got some visitors here in the studio, and we've been trying to get the sound system working and everything, and so I will take a whack at that at the top of this hour, in a couple of minutes. But something is going on. Mike Johnson has figured out some sort of weird little parliamentary move. In fact, this is the headline in Politico is House Republicans move to block vote on Trump's tariffs. GOP leadership slipped language into a House rule on their stopgap funding bill that would prevent any member of Congress from bringing up a resolution terminating Trump's declaration of a national emergency. And Greg Meeks and Democratic colleagues filed privilege resolutions to end that. But, this doesn't explain it either. It's, I'll figure it out and report back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
5 black robes with billionaire strings, cracked the cord and sold a dream. A nation bled for liberty now drowns beneath the money stream. They crown the kings we overthrew. Let fascists march in red, white, blue. The Constitution's torn in two. Injustice whispers, what did you do? do. The billionaires took the bench. Now the laws are rigged, the lines are etched. But we're not bowing, we're not through. We'll raise this flag till it's red, white, true. We've beaten tyrants once before. We'll break their grip and store. This is the fight for our soul's defense. 'Cause the billionaires took the bench.
Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour, 50 after. Darren in Huntington Beach, California. Hey, Darren. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me on. I was listening to CNN this morning, and they had the Secretary of Commerce, I believe.
Howard Lutnick?
Excuse me?
I think, Lutnick is Secretary of Treasury? I can't keep them straight. Anyhow, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so he was praising, the tariffs and everything. And then at the end of the interview, the interviewer said, in a nutshell, so is this about lowering the value of the dollar? And he went on to say that the dollar is artificially inflated. And I have a big concern that this whole thing about tariffs is a ruse. What they're trying to do is to devalue the dollar to the point where they can have an excuse to move over to cryptocurrency as our nation's gold standard.
Yeah. I'm skeptical of that, Darren. Cryptocurrency isn't actually a currency. It's a commodity, and it's a very volatile commodity. But, Trump and his sons now have started 2 different cryptocurrency companies, and also his media company. Apparently, they just filed papers with the SEC to allow the insiders to sell something like $1 billion worth of stock. So it looks like Trump and his insiders are getting ready to cash out on that too. It wouldn't surprise me that they're trying to do something like that. But the big problem with this is that he's, as I said in the first hour, the way you do tariffs to protect domestic manufacturing is by putting tariffs on individual products. You identify those individual products out of the 17,000 product categories that the Department of Commerce has, and that is, Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary. You identify the product categories that you want made in the United States, and there are some that just, we don't want to have...
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So there's really no... Are you saying there's really no technical way where they can take us off the dollar as like the world exchange and switch over to a cryptocurrency?
Correct. They conceivably the world could shift to the euro, and the BRICS countries have talked about putting together a gold-based currency and things like that, but it's never really taken off. The ruble is very, very weak. I mean, Russia's entire economy is smaller than California's, smaller than Italy's.
So why aren't they concerned about the value of the dollar? Why he was just like, oh, it's no big deal.
Well, the stronger the dollar is, the more expensive imports into the United States are. And no, wait a minute, it's the other way around, isn't it? The less expensive imports are. So you'd want to weaken the dollar to strengthen foreign currencies so that foreign goods would cost more when you import them, if I'm doing my math right in my head. And so Lutnick would be, interested in driving down the value of the dollar if he's trying to block imports. But that's taking a sledgehammer to a fly.
Right.
I mean, it's we're back to Yosemite Sam here with this shotgun. Yeah. Darren, thanks for the call. I got to move along. Thank you. Gary in Kansas City, Kansas. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, I wanted to talk about tariffs and the fact one of the things that was mentioned by our prior caller was that Trump was planning on using these tariffs and the $6 trillion or whatever it is this week to pay for billionaire tax cuts.
Right.
And as you pointed out, tariffs aren't always bad, but if you distribute all the money into billionaires' pockets, you eventually create a stagnation which can crash the economy.
Well, not only that, tariffs are temporary. I mean, the whole point of a tariff is to encourage people not to pay the tariff, right? You punish General Motors for having a car factory in Mexico. They move that factory to Michigan. They're not paying tariffs anymore. So where'd your tariff revenue go? It's gone.
That's right. And if instead of giving all the tariff money to billionaires, he were to distribute it 100% to the American people overall, he could end up using that tariff to strengthen the economy.
Yeah.
Then people would be able to afford some of the higher prices.
Which FDR
and
did.
It also wouldn't.
Large parts of the New Deal were funded by tariffs, actually.
That's right. That's right. And the reason, I don't know if all of your viewers realize this, but one of the reasons that giving all this money to billionaires instead of average people crashes the economy, it has to do with some Keynesian theory. If you give an average worker $100, he'll spend maybe 90 of it boosting the economy and save 10. If you give a billionaire $100, he maybe will spend $10 and hoard $90 of it, which stagnates the economy.
Yeah.
Money circulation is the key to a healthy economy, much the same way blood circulation in the human body is essential to having a healthy human body and biology.
Yeah, what you're describing is classic demand-side economics. We had a multimillionaire, maybe a billionaire on this program. He was one of the founders of Patriotic Millionaires a couple of years ago, and he said, Tom, I make 10,000 times more than you do, or I've got 10,000 times more money in the bank than you have, but I don't need 10,000 more pairs of jeans. I mean, it's just real simple.
That's right. How many TVs can you watch if you're wealthy? How many palaces can you own?
Right.
There is a useful text some of your readers might enjoy by Ravi Batra, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Ravi used to be on our program all the time.
Yes, he has a book called The Myth of Free Trade, which you may have seen. And in it, he explains that domestic monopolies, rather than modest tariffs, are probably our biggest enemy. But our tariffs become a big enemy when Trump starts funneling all the money to billionaires and
when he imposes them on countries rather than products. Smart tariffs are done on products. You only declare tariffs on countries during times of war.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by France Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. So I figured it out. Mike Johnson's one-day scam. It started out when Representative Luna and I don't have her name here. I'm sorry. The Democrat. These two young women who are members of Congress both had babies. Luna had her baby a few months ago. The other one, the Democrat, had her baby a few weeks ago. And they both wanted Congress to, the House of Representatives, to allow proxy voting under motherhood circumstances, you know, for new mothers, specifically. And Mike Johnson, principally in opposition to the Democrat, this was before the Republican, who I believe is Luna, before the Republican got involved, the Republican mom. When the Democratic mom was asking for this, she tried to get this done, and there was some bipartisan support for it. She tried to get it done by what's called a discharge petition. Now, a discharge petition, the way the House of Representatives works, typically the way legislation moves is somebody proposes the legislation, it goes to committee, to the appropriate committee. The committee debates it and decides whether to report it out or not. If they report it out, that means a majority of the people on the committee said, yes, this is good legislation, send it to the floor. It gets sent to the floor, it's again debated, and then there's a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. And if a majority says yes, then, you know, it gets passed, it goes to the Senate, goes through the process in the Senate, and then if it gets passed there, it goes to the White House. Or there can be a reconciliation between the two. When the Speaker of the House, though, he can insert himself into this process where the bill comes out of committee, but before there's a vote held on the floor of the House. He can simply hold the bill and say, I'm not going to allow a vote. And that's what Mike Johnson did with this bill that would have allowed these newborn moms, the moms of newborns, to vote by proxy. He didn't want them to vote, or at least he didn't want the Democrat to vote. So then she put together what's called a discharge petition. Now, a discharge petition is the one way that average members of the House of Representatives can get around obstruction by the Speaker of the House. The Speaker can say, no, we're not going to have a vote on that. With a discharge petition, if you can get a simple majority of the members of the House of Representatives to say yes to the discharge petition, it's also called a privileged something or other, privileged resolution. With this thing, there's a 15-day window, and it has to basically sit for like 15 days while it's being discussed and debated and whatnot. And at the end of those 15 days, the House votes on it, and the Speaker can't control that; he can't stop it. So what Mike Johnson did was he proclaimed, and I'll quote Politico on this, he declared the remainder of the days in the first session of the 119th Congress do not qualify as calendar days, exempting the national emergency from a law that allows Congress to force a vote. That would be the discharge petition. And so it started out with we don't want these young moms to be proxy voting. But now it's being used on the tariff thing. So now you've got in the Senate, they just voted to say, no, Donald Trump can't just do these tariffs anymore. He's doing them based on a state of emergency that he declared, and there is no emergency. We're going to end the emergency. And Congress has the power to do that. It's built into the act that gives Trump the power to declare a state of emergency. It says that that state of emergency can be negated by a discharge position in the House of Representatives and concurrence of the Senate. So Mike Johnson is now hanging on to his assertion that it's between now and September 30th, the end of this fiscal year, is only one day, and therefore there will be no discharge petitions allowed. And we'll see how long he can hold this, he can keep this going, because this is starting to seriously piss off some members of the House of Representatives. As you can imagine, I mean, he's basically stripping from them one of their major powers. It's just a pure power play. I don't know any other way to describe it. Meanwhile, we have Robert Reich. And by the way, at the bottom of the hour, Alex Lawson is going to be with us. I mentioned at the opening of the program he'd be with us here in the third hour. He will be with us in about 20 minutes. He's out scouting locations in D.C. for Saturday's protest. But Robert Reich just published over at his Substack newsletter, robertreich.substack.com, 10 rules for dealing with Trump's demands for capitulation. And it's pretty straightforward stuff, and I think it's pretty good. On Tuesday, he points out, day before yesterday, Trump targeted Harvard, threatening to pull $9 billion in contracts, research contracts, all kinds of things that university has with the federal government. Last week, he was targeting major law firms. And so this is Reich's advice for how to deal with this sort of thing, these kinds of bullying and blackmailing. He says, number one, stop treating Trump's excuses as his real concerns. You know, he says that he's worried about anti-Semitism at our universities. Trump doesn't give a rat's ass about anti-Semitism, and everybody knows it. He just wants to trash universities. Reich says, for the same reason, stop assuming that Trump is concerned about other nations' unfair trade practices or illegal immigrations. These too are pretexts. He's using these for, number three, Trump's major interest is capitulation itself. Surrender is the whole point. He's trying to puff himself up, build himself up as the dictator of the world, essentially. Number four, each surrender feeds the public impression that Trump wants fed, that he is all-powerful, invincible, and able to get every person, institution, and country on earth to cower to him. Number five, each capitulation encourages him and his goons to engage in even more bullying of more institutions and more countries. Number six, most of these institutions and countries will cave to Trump because their leaders are mainly concerned about their own institution or their own country's survival. So number seven, it's vitally important, therefore, that institutions and countries join together to fight this systemic intimidation. He says universities, faculties must join together under the umbrella of the American Association of University Professors. He says Canada, Mexico, Japan, and the European Union should join together to create a brand new special economic trade zone that excludes the United States. And he finally says the media must not only not fan the flames of Trump's madness, but they should celebrate the institutions that are standing up to Trump, like Jenner and Block, the law firm, or Canada or Mexico, and condemn those who have surrendered to Trump, like Columbia University, the Paul Weiss law firm, Israel and Vietnam on tariffs. So I think it's pretty reasonable advice. Pretty good stuff from Robert Reich. He's generally has pretty good stuff. So what's on your mind today? Billy in Wimberley, Texas. Hey, Billy, how's our favorite Trump lover today? Billy? Listening on Sirius XM? Huh. Well, that's unusual. David in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I'm a fan of your show, and I've been a student of history for, hate to say it, I'm 70 years old, so probably about 55 years or so since high school. And I know that you are, and I'm an avid reader of Heather Cox Richardson as well because of that. But my recent purchase of a book is The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by
William Scherer. Yeah. I read that back in the 80s when I was living in Germany.
Oh, yeah. And the book is immense. It's about 1,200 pages, and I'm only on page 200 and something. But, I'm in the point where Hitler has just become chancellor of Germany, and after about 2 or 3 months, it's scaring me. I'm a bit paranoid, perhaps, when I read the news and then I read this book. The similarities between what's going on with the current political environment and the history of the Third Reich. And Hitler assumed power by squelching any dissent.
Yep.
He assumed control of all of the agencies in the German government.
Yep.
And then I listen to you and I read the paper and I go, oh, am I suffering some paranoia here?
No.
And I just wondered, from your perspective, and you have history in Germany as well, you just said, what's your take on that?
Well, you and I think that William Scherer and the rise and fall of the Third Reich is history. Donald Trump thinks it's an instruction manual. I mean, that's my opinion. He according to his first wife, he slept with a collection of Hitler's speeches on the table beside his bed. Wouldn't surprise me if it's absolutely true. I think listen to Jason Stanley, who is fleeing the country, by the way. He's going to teach at the University of Toronto. He's leaving Yale University. He wrote the book on fascism, or on authoritarianism. Like I said, I think that Trump thinks that that's an instruction manual. David, thanks for the call. Nice to hear from you. I appreciate it. 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back with your calls in just a moment. Welcome back. Mark in San Francisco. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Well, Mallory McMorrow is running for Senate, and I think all over the country we need to support her. She's a fighter. She's terrific, and she could be a future president.
Yep.
First female president. She's that good.
She is, in my mind, she is the new young version of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, she's terrific.
Yeah.
And Tom, I wanted to also let you know that when we want to recall a Republican, you can recall them in states. You can't recall federal Republicans in Congress or Senate, but in the states, you can recall governors and other positions in the state.
Right. The rules vary by state, but generally speaking, yes.
Yeah, so you have to look at the provisions, but, in some of these red states, if they're unhappy with these Republicans and they can get them out, they need to start doing it.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I'm not holding my breath, but wouldn't that be nice? Mark, thank you. Spot on. Yeah, well said. Janet in Denver. Hey, Janet, what's up?
Hi, Tom. First of all, I want to thank you very much for all you do. We have learned a whole lot from you, and I appreciate your taking my call.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for a while, it seemed to me that people in general, Democrats, really didn't know what to do, and people are doing a lot more now, getting a lot of ideas and protests and all that. Here in Colorado, I see many, many times a day an ad for one of the Republican House of Representatives named Gabe Evans, and the commercial says, he did this, 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 and this. Call Representative Gabe Evans and thank him for all that he has done. So at least here, they're not really allowed to run for the House at this point in time, but in reality, that is what this commercial is doing.
Yeah.
So my suggestion to Democrats, because I think that I don't think money is their biggest problem. I think that they should start running ads all over the country saying, this is what your Republican representative has done, voted for more taxes, and maybe everybody doesn't really get the tariffs or taxes, and explain that and say, this is what your Republican representative has done and has voted for. Call them and tell them that you object.
Yeah, Trump just put into place the largest tax hike in American history. I mean, this is even bigger than Smoot-Hawley. Good point. The other point I'd make is typically when you see ads where a member of Congress is being thanked for a vote or a series of votes, that ad is paid for by the lobbyists who requested that person do the vote. So, when the fracking companies buy off a politician and they vote for more fracking, they'll say, thank Joe Blow for, And they may not even ask you to thank him for the vote that they asked for. But I would suggest that you look at the crawl at the bottom. Or at the fine print at the bottom of the screen. They're required by law to specify who paid for the ad, and it'll probably be some group that you never heard of. Americans for Wonderful Life or something. And if you Google that group, you will probably discover that group is a lobbying group or a front group for a particular industry. But that doesn't diminish your point, and your point is that. Democrats need to be pointing out the horrors that Republicans are committing. And frankly, need to be bragging on their own successes. I'm with you.
Exactly.
A very, very good observation. Thank you very much for the call. It is 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day. And Alex Lawson will be with us in about 15 minutes, so stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Did you know that the ancient Roman Republic, which for 480 years was actually a democratic republic before Julius Caesar kind of ended the democracy phase and replaced it with the autocracy phase, that they were brought down by a very small group of very rich people. The richest man in ancient Rome was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest guy, the billionaire of Rome. And he frankly hated the Roman free bread for all welfare system. It was being paid for with his tax dollars, after all. So him and Pompey the Great and a few other rich guys got together, and they basically crashed Rome. They turned it into an oligarchy and then into a tyranny. And the parallels to what Trump is doing right now are absolutely shocking. There's an article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled "American Caesar: Trump's Path to Power Mirrors Rome's Darkest Days." Check it out.
They worked their lives, they paid their dues. Now billionaires are spreading news that Social Security's gotta go. But we see through that dog and pony show. Behind closed doors, the votes are cast by men who serve the ultra class. They won't face us in the light of day, but we're here and we've got something to say. Hands off our Social Security. This belongs to you and me. We paid in.
Minutes past the hour. We'll hear that song again in a few minutes. But Kevin in Clearwater, Florida. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm going to jump back in my car. While I was driving, I had to stop for gas, so I am in the quiet now. Let me get you off speakerphone. Is that better?
It's just fine. As long as you're holding the microphone next to your mouth, it doesn't matter if you're on speakerphone or not. What's up, Kevin?
Tom, as usual, when I listen to your show, the few times I've ever been on hold, 20 other subjects come up
it's a problem.
While I'm listening. But originally I called because I was thinking about the value-added tax that you used to harp on and do, as opposed to these type of tariffs and things.
Right.
And I'd like you to expound on that. But you brought up my representative, Anna Paulina. She finally got hit upside the head with one of these, these are wonderful policies until they affect me.
Right.
Which for once she's doing the right thing. But we won't get too far into them. I wanted to throw something at you, and I know you've read Tom Clancy, and I tried to look up Red Storm Rising, and I realized he had a co-author, so it doesn't come up if you put up Tom Clancy novels. But in that, of course, the Russians disrupt the entire world economy, cause a ruckus between troops at the East-West Germany border, and throw the whole world into chaos and start taking over territories. And, of course, early Tom Ryan comes up with a solution where they just kind of freeze frame. And they said, we're going to take a picture of exactly where we were, let's say, when Donald Trump took office, and we're going to set everything back to there, because we know these tariffs that they're putting out today are just one more manipulation of the stock market. their $5,000 check would be maybe 30% of what, 30% of maybe what I've lost so far.
Yeah.
But for your listeners, if you could, and I'll take that off the air, off the phone. You used to do a wonderful description of the fairness of the value-added tax, and I think it was based on they'll build it in China, they'll ship it to a country really cheap, and then sell it through their own company to a different, subsidiary in America, so that the markup and possible tariffs are smaller.
Yeah. So let me.
And then the value-added tax was a way around it.
I've got a break coming up here in a minute and a half. So let me respond. First of all, with regard to Tom Clancy, boy, it's been 40 years since I read Red Storm Rising.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So I'd have to go back and read it to intelligently speak. And although it was made into a movie, so we could, it's a lot.
Red Storm Rising was.
Maybe not. Maybe one of his novels was made into a movie. I thought that was it. But
well, Hunt for Red October.
Hunt for Red October. You're right. Yeah, that was it.
And Some of All Fears. I think was.
Yeah. So anyway,
and I think there was one more.
Number one, it may well be that Putin has encouraged Trump to do this. It's interesting that Russia is about the only country that Trump did not put tariffs on, along with Belarus and North Korea. The way VAT taxes work is they are taxes on every step in the manufacturing process. When you convert iron ore into steel, there's a very tiny tax added to it. When the steel is turned into rolled steel or flat steel to make a car door, there's a tax put on it. When the steel is turned into the car door, there's a VAT tax added to it. When the car door gets painted, there's a VAT tax added. When the car door gets added to the car, there's a VAT tax added. So nobody, bears this huge tax. Typical VAT taxes in Germany when I lived there in the 80s were 17%. I don't know what they are now. But that's how VAT taxes work. It's called value added. Every time you add value to a product, there's a very small tax added to it. And it's a reasonable way to have, manufacturing taxed in a way that doesn't kill manufacturing. Trump is trying to claim the European VAT taxes are actually tariffs. Oddly, typically when they export products, they reverse out the VAT tax. Only Europeans pay VAT taxes. So it just doesn't make any sense, Kevin.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
If you've ever been in a country with a VAT tax, when you go through the airport on your way out, you can turn in your receipts and get your VAT tax back, for example. Alex Lawson up next. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
They worked their lives, they paid their dues. Now billionaires are spreading news that Social Security's gotta go. But we see through that dog and pony show. Behind closed doors, the votes are cast by men who serve the ultra class. They won't face us in the light of day, but we're here and we've got something to say. Hands off our Social Security. This belongs to you and me. We paid in, we earned that right. We won't back down, we're gonna fight. Hands off our Social Security. No dog chainsaws on our tree. We won't let the system crash and burn. It's ours and now it's our turn.
Yep, hands off our Social Security. Oh, here we go. Let's finish that
Making
one.
folks wait while they sit back and laugh. Thousands fired, code rewrote. Now grandma's on hold with no one to quote. Field offices shuttered in towns so small, while Musk and Trump make their curtain call. They say efficiency, but it's just spin. They're cutting us out to let Wall Street win. Hands off our Social
There you go.
Security.
Hands off our Social Security. Welcome back. Alex Lawson is on the line with us, the president of Social Security Works, just by coincidence right now. SocialSecurityWorks.org. Hey, Alex, every Republican on the Senate Finance Committee voted to continue the Dodge destruction or Dodgy destruction of Social Security. Seriously?
Yeah, it was I mean, it's not surprising because this is their plan, right? It's obviously Elon Musk is doing the dirty work, but the Republicans have spent decades. I mean, you can go actually back to Alf Landon, who ran against FDR
90 years ago.
Created 90 years ago, exactly. This is the Republican plan, so it's really no surprise that. Along party lines, all of the Republicans voted to Senate confirm Frank Bisignano, who has said that he is Elon Musk's guy. He's a Doge guy. He's going to continue the destruction of Social Security through destroying the Social Security Administration. A lot of that focus is on the technology, the information, the systems, and annihilating those so that people don't get their checks, and then privatizing it along one path. Kneecap the mailman, complain that the mail is late, and then you just so happen to have a cousin who's in the private mail delivery service. He'll charge 3 times as much and deliver a quarter of the results. That's Frank Bisignano. He's literally a billionaire monopolist who owns a payment processing company. Or runs a payment processing company that really could be central to a privatization scheme. Same time, they just want to destroy people's love and faith and confidence in Social Security so that they can get some extraordinary powers to just reach in and steal our benefits with only 51 votes instead of 60 votes. So it's a dual track attack that we're seeing on Social Security. And every Republican in Senate Finance just voted to continue that attack because it is congressional Republicans are part of this, right? It's not Elon Musk. It's not, somebody else over there. This is the Republican plot, and it has been for decades, to destroy our Social Security system at the behest of billionaires like Elon Musk and others on Wall Street. But just, don't be confused. It's the Republicans who are doing this. And all the Democrats voted against confirming him because I will say there is a real burgeoning understanding on the Hill amongst all the Democrats that the only way to fight in this administration is to stand fully united against all of the attacks that are being thrown at the American people by Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the congressional Republicans.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Alex, I understand that the latest that I've heard out of the Doge teenagers who are running amok inside the Social Security Administration, in addition to firing 7,000 workers and shutting down field offices, they say they're replacing the old COBOL programming, the common something business language, and COBOL works just fine. I mean, there's lots of systems that are still running on COBOL, even though it dates back to the 60s. They want to replace, because it's specifically written for business operations, for check writing and things. They want to replace that with a more modern code set, I guess. And they're going to do this very quickly. Typically, that's a kind of a process that would take years. I smell a rat. What say you?
It's worse than a rat. I don't know what metaphor I'd use, Tom, but you're totally right. It's fascinating. I've become a amateur expert on COBOL, and basically the entire global financial system is built on the foundation of this very, very old system built with taxpayer money. It's DOD, not surprisingly. And the thing about COBOL is you get the same story over and over again. All throughout the banking system as well, where people come in and they're like, we got to redo this system. And then they look into it and they're like, we can't. Right. It's actually impossible. It's too integrated into everything. And there's not enough people who actually still learn this language. And so they end up just building on top of COBOL. That's exactly what it's like at the Social Security Administration. And what these, their stupidity, the Doge goons, is only beaten by their arrogance, Tom. So they're saying, and I think they know that they're going to crash the system by doing this. So I think it's a little bit of both. But they're saying that they're going to use AI to go into the system and just redo the whole thing all the way down to the foundation level of COBOL. And what we've been warning, because we've been warned by the people who know this stuff. So the information and technology section of Social Security Administration was the one that they hit the hardest, and they just keep taking their chainsaw to it. So they've lost 400 people, the most of any of the areas, and the people who are left were denied privileges to see what is going on, and basically sort of locked out of their systems while
they locked the Social Security programmers out of the Social Security program?
Exactly.
Holy crap.
Basically, they know that the workers, the dedicated workers at the Social Security Administration, these are public servants. They take an oath to the Constitution to protect and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, just like all public servants do. These Doge kids didn't. I think they're the ones mentioned, right? Those are the domestic enemies.
Yeah.
So they don't want people seeing what's going on. But what we're hearing, Tom, and it's very scary. So they're saying, okay, as the coding is changing, we're going to start seeing these flash failures of the stuff that's built on top of COBOL. And that's like people not being able to go to the website. Now we have 16 cases, I think it is, of the website being intermittently down. That's the website on the front end and on the back end. So the one that workers need to get in there. 2 days ago, SSI, which is a separate program to Social Security, but it's administered by the Social Security Administration, people went on and their entire records were gone, which you remember last time I was on, I recommended people to print out their hard copy of their Social Security record, their wage record, and how much their benefit is. Because we've been hearing, don't trust that these Doge kids aren't going to wreck the system. Now, throughout all of that, COBOL has been processing and sending the checks out because it's super stable. But what people who are much smarter than me say, Tom, is these flashing red lights, as the Doge kids dig deeper into the system, when they hit COBOL, we should expect checks to not go out. That is the result of what they're doing. That will be the result of what they're doing.
Yeah. It's amazing. Alex, and of course Saturday, hands off is the theme of the protest Saturday. Hands off Social Security, hands off everything. Alex Lawson, president of SocialSecurityWorks.org. Alex, thanks so much for dropping by. It's always great talking with you. You inform us so well. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Great talking with you. It is 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, thanks for waiting so long on hold. I appreciate it. What's on your mind today?
No worries. Thanks for taking my call. I've been thinking about how long Trump has been dying to get his hands on these tariffs. And then we have the Republicans who have always had their own agenda, which I believe is to basically privatize the government. Mm-hmm. So how do they meld? How does get his tariff money and not give it to the billionaires? He doesn't want them to have money that he could have. I'm thinking that because right after his speech the other day, there was somebody that spoke up. It wasn't one of the doughboys. It was it was one of the secretaries of finance or whatever. He said, now all these countries, we want to make sure to warn you, don't do anything yet. Give it a little while, give it a week, and then why is he saying that? Well, I think that Donald Trump is putting tariffs on all these companies, and the threat of war is out there, and everybody now knows it and has known it for a little bit, and we are the most powerful country in the world in our army, if I may, and everybody ought to be a little bit scared, right? Mm-hmm. And Trump's going to start with his deals. He's going to start on day one. He's going to call up China. He's going to call up the wealthier countries. And he's going to say, look, put money into this account and do it quick. I'm only going to give you a week.
Cross my palm with cash and I'll cut you a break, in other words.
I love that. And I think everybody's at home saying, "Oh, what's he going to how you?" But how has he always done it? It's his money. Other people's money is his. But he's going to share that.
And if you want to have dinner with him, just give him $1 million. He'll invite you to dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
Exactly. And I think that the billionaires are not going to get theirs with the cutting back of the privatizing, but I don't think they're going to get any of this money from tariffs. I really think that's going. And guess what? We historically do not audit Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're
so
right.
We won't know where that money is going.
Yeah.
So
excellent.
That's what I think. And then he's going to let up on the taxes based on who has given him how much.
Yeah, excellent point, Lori. Thank you. Thank you so much for calling and making it. That is spot on. Dave in Houston, Texas. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Good.
Appreciate your show.
Thank you.
Hello.
So what's on your mind, Dave?
Yes, sir. I wanted to address one of the core problems we have in the United States, which is festered over the last 40 years, and it's the income and wealth inequality that's facing our Americans today. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, has anybody thought about what are the solutions to this? And I've come up with what's that?
Oh, keep going.
And I was thinking, there's a three-pronged solution from my perspective. First, let's look at income. And I know these regulations would be very difficult to implement and control, but we've got to start somewhere.
Well, if you want to have a maximum income, you just have a high income tax. I mean, we used to have a 90% income tax bracket.
On income, basically, I don't necessarily worry about an income tax rate. Let's look at what the discrepancy between. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. The discrepancy between the highest paid and the lowest paid. Mm-hmm. So if there's a corporation, why not set that rate at 50 times?
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable, Dave. And We used to have policies like this that kept wild wealth in check. No. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. Back 10 minutes before the hour here, and picking up your calls. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Yes, hi, Tom. Maybe you can shed some light on how these tariffs work, because a friend of mine works in steel, and I asked him if the tariff is still on. He said this was his text to me. It's hard to say now. I buy domestic steel and always have, but even our U.S. steel has gone up a lot. They can hike their prices quite a bit and still be under the tariff price. It's all a mess.
Right. So what happens is you've got a steel market here in the United States, and say that I'll just make numbers up, okay? Let's say we, as a country, we consume, 100 million tons of steel a year, and we only manufacture 50 million tons of steel a year, so we have to import 50 million tons of steel a year. Now, the competition between the imports and the domestic manufacturer, over time will pretty much equalize those prices. But then a tariff comes along that increases the cost of the foreign-made steel by, say, 20%. And what do the domestic manufacturers do? They go, hey, we just got a 20% advantage over the other guys. We can raise our prices, not necessarily 20%, but we can raise our prices 5, 10, 15%, and nobody's going to squeal because we're still cheaper than the other guys.
But it's not fair hiking the price on the guy who's willing to buy U.S. steel.
You're right.
He's paid, that was the price set long time. He's been, paying it and sticking loyal to U.S. steel. And now they're jacking their customers because, now the import is more expensive.
Right, but
wouldn't you think that they stay with their loyal U.S. doesn't, so there's not that much of a benefit.
Oh, get ready for 10% inflation, Diane. Get ready for really serious inflation. If Trump holds to these tariffs for a year. Pardon?
I thought the whole idea was to make people more loyal to the U.S. products.
Yeah, well, the whole idea is to encourage American purchasers of product, whether it's consumers or whether it's Walmart, American purchasers of products to purchase products made in the United States, and thus encourage manufacturers to move their manufacturing back to the United States. But there will be, Donald Trump is absolutely right that there will be a period of disruption. And what he's wrong about is he thinks it's going to get resolved by the next election. And it's not. He's set us up for at least a 5-year whack, a major inflationary whack. And frankly, the only thing that'll prevent inflation is what happened in the 70s when we had an inflation crisis, which, whether it was caused by increase in the price of oil, which affected pretty much everything because we transported all our products. Yeah, it was a combination of inflation and recession. And, we called it stagflation. The economy becomes stagnant, but you have inflation. And that's what you're going to see. And it's going to get really bad if he doesn't back down. Diane, thanks for the call. I got to move along. Jeff in Cambridge, Minnesota. Hey, Jeff, what's up? Thanks for listening to KTNF.
Two things, I guess. Your last caller, the problem with reshoring all of the American manufacturing that's done overseas, it won't happen instantaneously. It'll take 5-10 years.
My point.
Number two, a different topic. So Elon Musk wants to go after people that were supposedly cheating on Social Security. I have a different idea. How about let's going after the biggest medical fraud in U.S. history, $1.7 billion, that was perpetrated in part by Senator Rick Scott and his company.
Oh, you're talking, Rick Scott used to, for people who don't know what you're talking about, Rick Scott, who's now the senator from Florida, previously the governor of Florida. Before he became governor, he was CEO of a hospital chain, and they were convicted of the largest Medicare fraud in the history of the world. And, he got out, as I recall, before the conviction, and I'm not sure that he himself was ever convicted, but, it left a stink around him. But he walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's how he funded his run for the governorship and the Senate. It would be interesting to see an investigation of that, Jeff. Thanks for the call. Randy in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What's up?
It's about Elon Musk. So many people seem to think he's just, is a genius. And I just wanted to run 2 points by you, and you can confirm my belief in it. One is that he saved the Tesla company, but he really had kind of a niche market on it being, $80,000 cars for the rich.
Yeah, he didn't save it, by the way. Barack Obama did. Barack Obama bailed out Tesla with a massive, almost $1 billion loan, and that's the only reason the company survived.
Oh, my gosh. And these people are saying now that's more profitable than Ford or the best company
Well, they're
in
not
the world.
more profitable. Their stock is worth more. And it's just wild. I mean, the price-earnings ratio, the difference between what the price of the stock is and how much the company earns as a percentage. Across the auto industry, it runs 5 or 6 times. Across the tech industry, it runs around 10 to 12, maybe 15 times. Tesla, if my recollection is correct, is valued at a PE ratio of over 50 times. And it's because it was basically a meme stock. Everybody was all excited. Hey, Tesla, these aren't cars. They're computers on wheels and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just waiting for that patina to wear off because I don't think it's going to last. Randy, thanks for the call. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it, and get ready for Saturday. Do you know where you're going to go and what you're going to do? It's going to be a lot of fun. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you, and stay safe. I will catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say